Jake Morrison walked into the biggest room he had ever seen, and his heart started beating fast because he knew this moment would change everything for humanity forever. And the massive chamber stretched out before him like a metal ocean filled with creatures that looked nothing like humans, and some had 6 arms while others glowed like living stars, and the strangest ones looked like giant insects with wings that sparkled in the dim light. And Jake tried to keep his face calm, even though inside he felt scared because he was just one human among all these powerful alien beings who had been traveling between stars for thousands of years, while humans had only learned to leave Earth 200 years ago. And now he had to speak for his entire species in front of beings who could destroy his home world with a single command. The Zeliphi High Commander stood up from his crystal throne, and Jake had to look up because the alien was 8 feet tall with skin that looked like blue diamond, and when he spoke his voice filled the entire chamber like thunder rolling across the sky. And Jake felt small and weak, but he remembered that millions of people back on Earth were counting on him to be brave and strong, so he stood up straighter and looked directly at the commander, even though his hands were shaking a little bit inside his gloves. "Human representative," the commander said, and his words came through the translation device that hung around Jake's neck. "Your species has been studied and measured and found to be lacking in all important ways." And Jake wanted to argue, but he knew he had to listen first because that was what diplomats did even when they heard things they did not like. "Your weapons are simple metal tubes that throw small pieces of metal, and your ships move slowly through space like wounded animals, and your people fight each other over tiny pieces of land on one small planet, while we control entire star systems with billions of worlds." Jake looked around the chamber and saw representatives from 12 different alien civilizations, and each one looked more advanced and powerful than anything humans had ever imagined. And the Vorthek delegate had 4 arms and compound eyes that could see in all directions at once, while the Luminar representative was made of pure energy that danced inside a metal suit, and the Deep Watch ambassador breathed water instead of air and lived in a tank that floated above the floor. And all of them were nodding their heads or making whatever gesture their species used to show agreement, because they all thought humans were weak and primitive. "We have decided," the commander continued, "that your species will surrender control of Earth and all its resources to the Galactic Council, and you will accept our guidance and protection, because you are too young and foolish to govern yourselves properly. And if you refuse this generous offer, then we will take your world by force, and your people will be scattered to work as servants on distant planets, where they will learn to be grateful for our mercy." Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his voice steady when he spoke. "What if we choose to fight?" And several aliens made sounds that might have been laughter, because the idea of humans fighting them seemed impossible and ridiculous. The commander's crystal skin flashed brighter for a moment. "Then you will die quickly and completely, because your entire military could not defeat a single one of our scout ships, and we have 3,000 warships waiting just outside your solar system right now, and each one carries enough firepower to turn your moon into dust." Jake nodded slowly because he had expected this answer, and he had prepared for this moment his entire life, even though he hoped it would never come. "How long do we have to decide?" he asked. "1 standard galactic year." The commander replied, "which equals approximately 1 of your Earth years, and when that time ends, we will return for your answer, and if you have not surrendered, then we will demonstrate why resistance is futile." The meeting ended with Jake walking back to his small shuttle, while alien eyes watched him from every direction, and he could feel their confidence and arrogance like heat from a fire, because they were certain that humans would surrender rather than face destruction. And as his ship left the massive station and started the long journey back to Earth, Jake activated his secret communication system and spoke the words that would start the greatest war in human history. "Control, this is Morrison, and Operation Underdog is now active," he said into his microphone. "They think we are weak and helpless, and they expect US to surrender without a fight, but they have made one big mistake, because they do not understand what humans do when someone threatens our home and our families and our freedom." Jake looked out his window at the stars that seemed cold and distant and hostile, but he smiled for the first time since arriving at the alien station. Send word to every military base and every government and every person on Earth that we have 1 year to prepare, and tell them that these aliens are about to learn. What happens when you back humans into a corner because we may be young and our technology may be simple, but we have something they have, forgotten about after centuries of easy victories, and that something is the willingness to do whatever it takes to survive. General Alex Carter stood in the underground war room that had been carved deep into the mountain, and the walls around him flickered with hundreds of screens, showing every corner of Earth where humans were working day and night to prepare for the coming war. And he watched as massive construction machines built new factories, while scientists worked in laboratories, and soldiers trained in fields and deserts and forests all over the planet, and everyone knew that in less than 12 months, the most powerful military force in the galaxy would arrive to destroy everything they loved unless humans could find a way to fight back. Against impossible odds, Commander Mary Sullivan walked up to the general carrying a tablet full of reports from around the world, and her face looked tired because she had not slept much in the past 6 months since Jake Morrison returned from the Alien Council with news of the ultimatum. Sir, the orbital defense platforms are ready, and we have 300 satellites armed with nuclear missiles positioned around Earth, and the moon bases have been converted into military stations with rail guns that can shoot metal slugs at incredible speeds, she said while showing him pictures of the construction projects. But honestly, sir, their technology is still hundreds of years ahead of ours, and our best weapons might not even scratch their shields. Dr. Kevin Walsh looked up from his computer, where he had been studying video recordings of the alien species that Jake Morrison had secretly made during his visit to the council station. General, I've been analyzing everything we know about our enemies, and I think I have found some interesting weaknesses, he said while pulling up images of the different alien races. The Zalathi have never fought a war where their enemies used guerrilla tactics, because every species they conquered met them in open battle and lost quickly, and the Vorthak fight in perfect formations like a marching band, and they get confused when their enemies do not follow the same patterns. Captain Tony Rodriguez grinned as he listened to the scientist, because he had spent his entire military career learning how to fight enemies who were bigger and stronger and better equipped than his own forces. Dr. Walsh is right, sir, because these aliens have been winning wars for so long that they have forgotten what real fighting looks like. He said they expect their enemies to line up their spaceships and shoot at each other until one side gives up, but humans have been fighting guerrilla wars for thousands of years, and we know how to hide and strike and disappear before the enemy knows what hit them. Alex Carter nodded as he looked at the tactical displays showing Earth's defenses, and he knew that in a straight fight humanity would lose in a matter of hours, but humans had never been good at fighting fair, and that might be their only advantage. What about their psychology? He asked. Do we know anything about how they think? Dr. Walsh pulled up another screen full of data. The Luminar beings are made of energy, and they have never had to worry about physical pain or death the way humans do, so they might not understand how desperate people fight when their survival is threatened, and the Deepwatch species has lived underwater for millions of years, so they think in 3 dimensions, but they have never dealt with the kind of chaos that humans create in battle. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Adams came into the room carrying classified reports from intelligence agencies around the world. Sir, we have been intercepting alien communications, and it seems like they are not taking any special precautions because they believe this will be an easy victory, she said. Their scouts are mapping our major cities and military bases, but they are ignoring smaller towns and rural areas because they think those places are not important enough to worry about. Alex Carter smiled grimly, because the aliens were making the same mistake that many enemies of humanity had made throughout history, by underestimating the determination of ordinary people to defend their homes. That gives us an opportunity, because while they focus on our obvious targets, we can hide our real weapons in places they will never think to look. Captain Rodriguez pulled up a map of the world showing thousands of small red dots scattered across every continent. Sir, we have been training civilian volunteers in every country, and they know how to use simple weapons and explosives and communication equipment. And when the aliens land, they will find that every human settlement is a potential military base. Dr. Walsh added more information about the enemy The aliens also seem to have rules about how wars should be fought, and they expect their enemies to follow the same rules, but humans have never cared about fighting honorably. When our survival is at stake and we have weapons and tactics that they have probably never seen before. Mary Sullivan brought up another screen showing spacecraft construction. Sir, our shipyards have been working around the clock to build as many fighters as possible, but we are also converting civilian ships into weapons by attaching missiles and armor and stealth equipment, and the aliens will not expect cargo ships and passenger liners to suddenly start shooting at them. Alex Carter walked to the main display screen that showed a countdown timer. With less than 6 months remaining, and he thought about all the preparation that still needed to be done. The key is to make them fight our kind of war instead of their kind of war. He said they want a clean battle between organized fleets, but we are going to give them chaos and confusion and attacks from directions they never expected. Dr. Kevin Walsh nodded enthusiastically. Exactly, sir, because their computer systems are incredibly advanced, but they have never encountered the kind of viruses and hacking programs that human criminals have been developing for centuries, and their networks are designed to handle sophisticated attacks, but not simple, crude methods that seem primitive but actually work. Captain Tony Rodriguez stood up and saluted. Sir, my teams are ready to board enemy ships and fight hand-to-hand if necessary, because these aliens have probably never had to deal with humans carrying knives and explosives into their command centers. Alex Carter looked around the room at all the officers and scientists who had been working so hard to find ways to defeat an enemy that seemed unbeatable, and he felt proud of what humanity could accomplish when everyone worked together toward a common goal. They called us weak because we have not conquered other planets, but they do not understand that we have spent our entire history learning how to fight enemies who seemed impossible to defeat, and now we are going to teach them that humans are most dangerous when someone threatens what we love. Admiral Ryan Brooks stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Force ship Defiance and watched through the main window as thousands of alien ships appeared in the darkness of space, like deadly stars that had come to destroy his homeworld, and he had never seen so many enemy vessels in one place, and each one was larger and more advanced than anything humans had ever built, and their hulls gleamed with energy shields that could probably stop any weapon in Earth's arsenal. But Ryan was not afraid, because he had spent the last year preparing for this moment, and he knew that humans had advantages the aliens could not imagine. Communications Officer Kate Phillips turned toward the Admiral with worry in her eyes. Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the alien fleet, and they want to speak with our commander, she said, while adjusting the controls on her station. Ryan nodded and straightened his uniform because he wanted to look confident even though he was facing the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Put them on the main screen, Kate, and let us see what they have to say. The Zelethi High Commander appeared on the display, and his crystal skin reflected the lights from his ship's bridge, and his voice filled the human bridge with the same arrogance that Jake Morrison had described from their meeting at the Galactic Council. Humans, you have had 1 full year to consider our generous offer, and now the time has come for you to surrender your world and accept our protection, the alien said. We are prepared to be merciful if you submit immediately, but if you choose to resist, then your destruction will be swift and complete. Ryan Brooks smiled calmly, and his crew watched him with admiration because their admiral showed no fear in the face of overwhelming enemy force. Commander, we have indeed considered your offer very carefully, and we have prepared our response, he said, but I think you may be surprised by what we have decided, the alien commander's crystal features seemed to glow brighter with confidence. There can be only one logical choice for a primitive species like yours, because our fleet contains 3,000 warships, and each one carries enough firepower to destroy your largest cities, and your entire military could not defeat even one of our scout vessels. Ryan looked around his bridge at the men and women who had volunteered to be in the first battle against an enemy that everyone expected would destroy them, and he felt proud to serve with such brave people. You may be right about our technology, Commander, but you have made one serious mistake in your calculations. The alien leaned forward on his throne with curiosity. What mistake could we possibly have made when our analysis of your capabilities has been thorough and complete? Ryan's smile grew wider. You assume that we would fight the kind of war that you are used to fighting, but humans have never been good at following rules, especially when our survival is at stake. And before the alien could respond, Ryan gave the signal that started the most unconventional battle in galactic history. What happened next shocked every alien in the massive fleet, because instead of forming battle lines and engaging in traditional space combat, the human ships suddenly scattered in all directions like startled fish, and some headed toward the asteroid belt while others dove toward Earth's moon, and a few even seemed to be running away toward the outer planets. And the alien commanders watched in confusion, because this was not how civilized species conducted warfare. The Zealothy commander ordered his ships to pursue the fleeing humans because he thought they were retreating in panic. But as the alien vessels spread out to chase different groups of human ships, they fell into the trap that Admiral Brooks had spent months preparing. And suddenly the asteroid belt came alive with thousands of automated mining drones that had been converted into flying bombs, and each one was programmed to ram into alien ships at maximum speed. Lieutenant Carl Mason piloted his fighter through the chaos of the first engagement, and his ship was much smaller and faster than the enemy vessels. And he used tactics that his grandfather had learned in Earth's old wars, where small planes attacked massive ships. Command, this is Razor Squadron, and these aliens have no idea how to fight when their enemies refuse to stand still and trade shots, he reported while diving through the debris field that surrounded a burning alien cruiser. The human fighters emerged from hiding places behind Earth's moon and in the shadows of space stations, and they attacked in small groups that struck quickly and then disappeared before the alien gunners could target them effectively. And many of the pilots were using combat techniques that had been developed for fighting in Earth's atmosphere, but worked even better in the weightless environment of Space Commander Susan Kelly led a boarding party that used small stealth ships to attach themselves to the hull of a Vorthak destroyer, and her Marines cut through the alien armor with tools that had been designed for mining asteroids but worked perfectly for breaking into enemy ships. These insect creatures have never dealt with humans, carrying explosive charges into their command centers, she reported as her team fought through corridors that had never been designed for hand-to-hand combat. The aliens found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to follow any of the established rules of space warfare, and human ships appeared from directions that should have been impossible and attacked targets that seemed random but were actually carefully chosen to cause maximum confusion and damage to the alien fleet's command structure. Dr. Amy Foster watched the battle from her laboratory deep underground, and she smiled as her computer viruses spread through the alien communication networks like digital diseases. Their technology is incredibly advanced, but they have never encountered the kind of simple, destructive programs that human hackers developed centuries ago, she told her team while monitoring the chaos that her viruses were causing in the enemy fleet's coordination systems. The first battle lasted 18 hours, and when it ended, the alien fleet had lost nearly 400 ships, while humanity had only lost 37 vessels. And more importantly, the aliens had learned that humans did not fight wars the way civilized species were supposed to fight, and every tactic that the Galactic Council had used successfully for thousands of years was useless against an enemy that treated warfare as a desperate struggle for survival, where any method that worked was acceptable. Admiral Brooks stood on his bridge and looked at the tactical display showing the scattered remains of alien ships floating in space around Earth, and he knew that this was only the beginning of a long and difficult war. But he also knew that humanity had proven something important to themselves and to their enemies. They expected us to surrender or die quickly in a hopeless battle, he said to his crew, but instead they learned what happens when humans decide to fight for their freedom and their home. Commander Susan Kelly moved through the dark corridors of the captured luminar vessel with her boots making no sound on the strange metal floor, and behind her followed Sergeant Joe Martinez and 5 other Marines who had trained for months to fight inside alien ships, and they carried weapons that could work in the weird atmosphere that the energy beings needed to survive. And Susan felt excited because this was the kind of fighting that humans had always been good at, while their enemies had never experienced anything like it. The luminar crew members were beings made of pure energy, who lived inside mechanical suits that protected them from the physical world, and they had never had to worry about someone sneaking through their ship and cutting power cables or planting explosives in their engine rooms, because in all their thousands of years of space warfare, no enemy had ever been crazy enough to board their vessels during battle. Sergeant Martinez whispered into his communication device, "These energy creatures have no idea how to fight when someone gets up close with knives and grenades." And he grinned as he watched one of the luminar beings try to understand why its computer systems were shutting down after the humans had simply unplugged some important cables within 20 minutes. Susan and her team had taken control of the alien ship's bridge and captured 3 luminar officers, who could not believe that primitive humans had defeated their advanced technology, using nothing more than simple tools and determination. And Susan felt proud because she knew that all across the solar system other human teams were doing the same thing to alien ships that had never been designed for this kind of warfare. Captain Nicole Barnes commanded a fleet of converted civilian ships that included old cargo freighters and mining vessels and asteroid harvesters that had been equipped with weapons and armor by engineers who understood that humans had always been good at turning peaceful tools into instruments of war, and she smiled as she watched her ragtag collection of ships surround a massive alien supply convoy that was trying to bring food and fuel to the enemy battle fleet. The alien convoy commander sent a message demanding that the human ships identify themselves and state their business, because he could not believe that such primitive-looking vessels could possibly be a threat to his advanced escort ships. But Nicole Barnes had learned about warfare from studying Earth's old naval battles, where small fast ships had often defeated much larger enemies by using speed and surprise instead of raw firepower. "Attention alien vessels," Nicole said into her communication system. "This is Captain Barnes of the Earth Defense Force, and you are now our prisoners." And before the aliens could respond, her ships attacked from 6 different directions using tactics that merchant sailors had developed hundreds of years ago when they fought pirates. In Earth's ocean star, Amy Foster sat in her underground laboratory surrounded by computer screens that showed the progress of her digital attack on the alien communication networks, and she laughed with joy as she watched her simple viruses spread through the enemy's sophisticated systems like fire through dry wood. And the aliens had never encountered anything like the crude but effective programs that human criminals and hackers had been creating for centuries. The alien computer networks were designed to defend against advanced cyber attacks from other sophisticated civilizations, but they had no protection against the kind of basic destructive code that human teenagers had been writing in their bedrooms for fun. And Dr. Foster's viruses were not elegant or complex, but they worked perfectly to shut down alien navigation systems and communication arrays and weapon targeting computers. Dan Cooper led a team of specialists who had spent their entire careers breaking into computer systems that were supposed to be secure, and they had learned their skills by fighting against Earth's most advanced security programs. So the alien networks seemed almost easy to infiltrate once they understood the basic principles. And Don smiled as he planted logic bombs and trap programs throughout the enemy fleet's computer systems all across the solar system. Human special forces teams were striking at alien supply lines and communication stations and command posts using tactics that the sophisticated galactic civilizations had never seen before, and the aliens found themselves blind and confused as their carefully organized military machine began to fall apart under attacks that seemed random but were actually part of a coordinated strategy. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Miller led an assault on the alien mining operation that had been established on Mars, and his soldiers moved like ghosts through the red dust storms that covered the planet, and they used the harsh environment as camouflage and protection while they planted explosives in the alien machinery and freed human prisoners who had been captured during the early battles. The alien guards on Mars had never dealt with enemies who could survive in such a hostile environment without the protection of advanced technology, and they could not understand how humans could fight effectively while wearing simple spacesuits and breathing recycled air and eating food from packages. Captain Helen Turner commanded a group of modified submarines that had been equipped with rocket engines and life support systems that allowed them to operate in the vacuum of space, and her crews had trained for underwater combat on Earth, but they discovered that many of the same principles applied to fighting in three-dimensional space where enemies could come from any direction. The alien officers were completely baffled when human submarines appeared near their underwater bases on Europa and began attacking with torpedoes and depth charges that had been designed for ocean warfare but worked just as well in the ice-covered seas of Jupiter's moon. And Helen's crews used sonar and stealth techniques that the aliens had never encountered. Every human settlement, from the lunar colonies to the asteroid mining platforms, became part of a resistance network that gathered intelligence and launched surprise attacks and provided safe hiding places for human soldiers. And the aliens quickly learned that there was no such thing as a secure area in human-controlled space because every civilian could potentially be a spy or a saboteur. Colonel Eric Johnson studied the captured alien technology in his laboratory, and his engineering teams worked day and night to figure out how the enemy weapons and shields and engines operated, and they used trial and error and human stubbornness to solve problems that alien scientists had spent decades perfecting. And Eric was amazed to discover that much of the alien technology was actually simpler than it appeared. The aliens had built their machines to be elegant and efficient, but humans had always preferred equipment that was tough and reliable and easy to repair, and Eric's teams found ways to modify alien devices using spare parts from Earth machines and techniques that would have horrified alien engineers but worked perfectly well for resourceful humans who had been improvising solutions their entire history across the solar system. The tide of war was slowly turning as human forces adapted to fighting an enemy whose technology was superior, but whose understanding of warfare was limited by thousands of years of easy victories against civilized opponents who followed established rules. And the aliens began to realize that they were facing something they had never encountered before, which was a species that refused to accept defeat and was willing to use any tactic that might give them an advantage in their desperate fight for survival. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in a chamber that had not seen such chaos and confusion in over 1,000 years, and representatives from 12 alien civilizations gathered to discuss what they were now calling the human problem, and none of them could understand how a primitive species with crude technology had managed to turn their certain victory into a nightmare of unexpected defeats and constant harassment from enemies who refused to fight according to established rules. The Vorthic general stood before the assembly, and his insectoid features twitched with agitation as he tried to explain how his perfectly organized battle fleets had been defeated by human tactics that seemed to have no logic or pattern. The humans attack our supply lines instead of our battleships, and they use suicide tactics that no civilized species would consider, and they employ weapons of mass psychological destruction that corrupt our computer systems and demoralize our troops, he said, while his forearms gestured wildly. The Deepwatch representative spoke through her aquatic translator with confusion and frustration evident in her voice. Their fighters hide among debris fields and asteroid belts, and they strike from impossible angles using weapons that should not work but somehow do, and they have weaponized their own space junk and turned their civilian ships into instruments of war. And this is not how warfare should be conducted among intelligent species. The Zealothi High Commander admitted what none of them wanted to hear, which was that their supposedly invincible fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy they had dismissed as weak and primitive. The humans fight without honor or dignity, and they show no respect for the established conventions of galactic warfare, and they treat every engagement as a desperate struggle for survival, where any tactic is acceptable if it gives them an advantage. But while the aliens complained about human tactics, the war was turning in humanity's favor through sheer determination and creativity, and Colonel Eric Johnson stood on the bridge of a captured Zealothi dreadnought that now flew under Earth's flag, and his engineering teams had figured out how to operate alien technology through methods that horrified enemy technicians, but worked perfectly well for humans, who had always been good at making things work even when they did not fully understand the theory. Chief Mechanic Rachel Green wiped grease from her hands as she finished installing human control systems in the alien ship's engine room. Sir, these aliens build beautiful machines, but they never considered that someone might need to repair them using spare parts from a completely different technology base, she said, while pointing to the improvised connections that linked Earth computers to alien power systems. Technical specialist Mike Williams looked up from his workstation where he had been reverse engineering alien shield generators using techniques he had learned from taking apart old cars and appliances. Sir, we have figured out how to overload their defensive systems by feeding them false data that makes their computers think they are under attack from their own weapons, he said, with a grin. The human fleet had grown larger and more powerful as they captured enemy vessels and learned to use alien technology in ways that the original designers had never intended, and human engineers combined alien energy weapons with Earth targeting systems and created hybrid ships that were more effective than anything either species had built. Alone Commander Peter Davis led his strike team through the alien forward command base that had been hidden among the moons of Saturn, and his soldiers moved like shadows through corridors that had been designed to stop conventional attacks but offered no protection against humans who were willing to crawl through ventilation systems and maintenance tunnels to reach their objectives. The alien base commander watched in horror as human soldiers appeared in his control center after somehow bypassing every security system and defense mechanism that had protected galactic military installations for centuries, and he could not understand how primitive beings with simple weapons had infiltrated a facility that should have been impregnable. The element they never counted on, Peter reported to Earth Command as his team secured the alien communications hub, is that we have been preparing for war our entire existence, while they have been preparing for easy conquests, and they build defenses that work against civilized enemies but not against humans who are willing to do whatever it takes to win. Admiral Ryan Brooks coordinated the largest human offensive of the war from his command center, and he watched as months of careful planning finally came together in a coordinated attack that struck at every alien position throughout the solar system. And he felt proud as he saw how ordinary humans had learned to fight alongside captured alien technology. Captain Tony Rodriguez led ground forces in the assault on the alien fuel depot that had been established in the asteroid belt, and his soldiers used jetpacks and magnetic boots to fight in zero gravity while carrying weapons that had been designed for Earth warfare but worked even better in the weightless environment of space. The alien defenders had never fought an enemy that could move in 3 dimensions without spacecraft, and they panicked as human soldiers appeared above and below and from directions that should have been impossible, and attacked with grenades and rocket launchers and cutting tools that had been designed for mining but worked perfectly for destroying alien equipment. Dr. Kevin Walsh analyzed intelligence reports from across the solar system, and he smiled as he realized that the aliens were making the same mistakes that every enemy of humanity had made throughout history. They still think they can win through superior technology and firepower, but they do not understand that wars are won by the species that wants victory more and is willing to sacrifice more to achieve it, he told General Carter. The alien fleets found themselves fighting a completely different kind of war than they had expected, and instead of glorious battles between organized armadas, they faced constant harassment from small human units that struck quickly and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive, and every alien position became a target for sabotage and infiltration and psychological warfare. Captain Nicole Barnes reported from her position near Jupiter, where her converted civilian ships had just destroyed another alien supply convoy. So the enemy is having trouble keeping their forces supplied because we attack their cargo ships and fuel tankers faster than they can replace them, and their soldiers are starting to worry about being stranded in hostile territory. The momentum of the war had shifted completely, and what had begun as an alien invasion designed to conquer Earth quickly had turned into a desperate struggle for the galactic forces to maintain their positions in human space while dealing with an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once and fought with a ferocity and creativity that none of them had ever encountered. Commander Susan Kelly transmitted from a captured alien research station where her team had discovered classified information about galactic military doctrine. Sir, we have learned that these species have not fought a real war in over 500 years because every enemy they faced surrendered. quickly rather than face their superior technology, and they have no experience dealing with opponents who refuse to give up no matter how bad the odds become. The final battle for Earth began not with massive fleets facing each other in space, but with a coordinated, human offensive that struck simultaneously at every alien position throughout the solar system, and Admiral Ryan Brooks watched from his command center as 2 years of desperate preparation and unconventional warfare finally paid off in a victory that nobody had thought possible when the aliens first arrived with their ultimatum. "All units execute Operation Humanity," Ryan broadcast to every human force from the lunar colonies to the outer planets. "Show them what 8 billion angry humans can accomplish when someone threatens our home and our freedom and our future." The attack was unlike anything in the history of galactic warfare because humans did not try to match alien technology with superior firepower, but instead used every advantage that came from fighting on their home territory with the desperation of a species that had nowhere to retreat and nothing left to lose. Colonel Frank Miller led the assault on the alien mining operations on Mars, where his soldiers moved through the red dust storms like ghosts and struck at enemy positions that had been considered secure because they were protected by the harsh environment that aliens thought would stop any attacker. Captain Helen Turner's submarine forces emerged from the ice-covered oceans of Europa, where they had been hiding for months, and attacked the underwater alien bases using depth charges and torpedoes that had been designed for Earth's oceans but worked perfectly in the strange seas of Jupiter's moon. Every human settlement, from the smallest research station to the largest orbital platform, became part of the coordinated resistance network, and civilian volunteers who had spent 2 years learning guerrilla warfare techniques struck at alien supply lines and communication centers and command posts. The aliens found themselves fighting on 100 different fronts against an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once, and their sophisticated military organization began to collapse under the strain of dealing with attacks that came from every direction and followed no predictable pattern. Dr. Amy Foster smiled as she watched her computer viruses spread through the remaining alien networks like wildfire and shut down their navigation systems and weapon targeting computers and communication arrays. "Their technology is still more advanced than ours," she reported to Admiral Brooks, "but they never learned to defend against the kind of simple, destructive programs that human criminals have been writing for centuries." The Zealothi High Commander found himself aboard the last functional command ship in his fleet, and he watched in disbelief as the tactical display showed his forces being systematically destroyed by an enemy he had dismissed as primitive and weak. And when Admiral Brooks appeared on his communication screen, the alien leader's crystal features showed something that humans had never seen before, which was fear. "How is this possible?" the commander asked, and his voice no longer carried the arrogance and confidence that had marked their first meeting. "Our technology is superior to yours, and our weapons are more advanced, and our ships are faster and stronger, and our civilization has ruled the stars for thousands of years while you have barely learned to leave your home planet." Ryan Brooks leaned back in his command chair, and his expression was grim but satisfied as he looked at the alien who had threatened to destroy everything humans cared about. "You made one critical error, Commander, and that mistake cost you everything," he said. "You assumed that advanced technology wins wars, but technology alone has never been enough to guarantee victory." The human admiral gestured toward the tactical display that showed the solar system where alien ships burned and drifted powerless through space. "Wars are not won by the species with the best weapons or the most sophisticated equipment," he continued. "They are won by the species that wants victory more and is willing to do whatever it takes to survive and protect what they love," Commander Patricia Wright reported from the captured alien shipyard near Jupiter, where human engineers were already beginning to understand how to build their own versions of enemy technology. "Sir, we have secured their manufacturing facility, and Dr. Chris Allen says his team can have our own production line running within a few weeks using hybrid human and alien technology." Ryan Brooks nodded as he listened to reports from across the solar system where human forces had captured or destroyed every major alien installation. "You have been fighting civilized wars for thousands of years, Commander," and you follow established rules and conventions that make sense when both sides have something to lose. He said to the alien leader, "But humans do not fight civilized wars. When our survival is threatened." The alien commander listened with growing horror as the human explained why his mighty fleet had been defeated by a species he had considered inferior. "We fight desperate wars where anything that gives us an advantage gets used, and we treat warfare not as a contest of strength between organized armies, but as a struggle for survival where every human becomes a potential soldier and every piece of equipment becomes a potential weapon." Jake Morrison appeared on the communication screen from Earth, where he had been coordinating diplomatic efforts with other species in the galaxy. "Commander, the Galactic Council's surrender has been accepted by the Earth government, and your surviving ships are free to leave human space immediately and permanently," he said. "But you should know that every other civilization in the galaxy is now aware of what happened here." The alien commander realized that his defeat would have consequences far beyond the loss of his fleet, because other species would learn that the supposedly invincible galactic military could be beaten by determined opponents who refused to follow the established rules of warfare. "What will you tell them?" he asked. Admiral Brooks smiled coldly. "We will tell them the truth, which is that humans went to war not to conquer other worlds, but to defend our own home, and that when humans fight for their survival, they become the most dangerous force in the universe because we refuse to accept defeat no matter how impossible the odds may seem." As the surviving alien ships began their long retreat from human space, Jake Morrison addressed the people of Earth from the United Nations building in New York. "They called us weak because we had not conquered other planets, and they called us primitive because our technology was young, and they called us insignificant because we were new to the stars," he said. "But they learned what every enemy of humanity has learned throughout our history, which is that humans do not just fight wars, we redefine what warfare means." The galaxy would remember the lesson for centuries to come, because Earth's solar system became a place that other species approached with caution and respect. Not because humans had superior technology or overwhelming military force, but because they had demonstrated something that the sophisticated galactic civilizations had forgotten, which was that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who has everything to lose and nothing left to fear. In the months that followed, human exploration ships began venturing beyond the solar system under the protection of their hard-won reputation, and they carried with them the knowledge that being underestimated could be the greatest weapon of all, and that when humans were backed into a corner, they did not surrender or compromise, but instead showed their enemies what war truly meant. Stars belong to humanity now, not through conquest or superior technology, but through the simple demonstration that when humans went to war, they fought with a desperation and creativity and determination that no civilized species could match. And the galaxy had called them weak, and in response humanity had shown them the difference between fighting for glory and fighting for survival.